I did a show talking about LeBron James being disingenuous, and one of the things I discussed on that was him saying how he he is considering whether or not he wants to do he would actually want to do a walk away quietly like Tim Duncan at the end of his career, or if he wants to do the farewell tour like Kobe and Kareem and those guys. And my whole thing was, you know,
We're talking about the silent assassin who spent 2 decades dodging the spotlight and ignoring the noise. When he finally broke his silence, it hit way harder than a poster dunk ever could. He wasn't just reading off a stat sheet. He was declaring war on the narrative. This was about earning your stripes versus just running your mouth to get a seat at the table. When the league's quietest winner finally grabs the mic, you drop everything and pay attention. Believe me, it's about to get incredibly awkward.
Great coaching, persistence, drive, love for the game. We remember what happened last year and how it felt in that locker room, and we used it and built on it and got back here, and it's amazing. It makes last year okay.
17 years you have toiled side by side with Greg Popovich. What makes that relationship so special?
His fire. He brings it every year.
Fast forward to early January 2025. LeBron is doing his usual routine, dictating the headlines. He's comfortable during a sit-down interview, radiating that untouchable vibe, steering the story exactly where he wants it. They start with the softballs, longevity, dominance, being elite at age 40. Standard stuff. Then they drop the inevitable bomb. Where do you rank in history? LeBron shifts gears instantly, leaning in with that look that screams he's been dying to get this off his chest.
And the one I can draw the parallel to is this. Is anybody going to sit here and tell me in their right mind that Barry Sanders is not one of the greatest athletes to ever walk the face of the Spurs, 100%. Regardless of just being a football player?
Right.
They came close to maybe, advancing through the playoffs.
Not that close.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But my point
you're right.
My point being, you wouldn't have a discussion about great players in the NFL without including Barry Sanders. But this is a different discussion. This is a very, when you're talking about winning.
I've got love for the Pioneers, he starts, but then the vibe shifts. He drops the hammer. 5 rings today aren't the same as back then. The game has evolved, and the competition is on another level. He doubles down, pointing out that some guys camped out in one system with the same Hall of Fame teammates and one coach forever. He emphasizes that he had to adapt to different cities, rosters, and play styles. I've stacked up the MVPs, the titles, and 10 trips to the finals. I've put entire franchises on my back, and I'm still doing it at age 40. What more do you need for the GOAT conversation? The host tries to interject, but LeBron bulldozes right through. Let's keep it real. Some of these legends had a cushion with super teams ready-made for them. I had to build mine from scratch. Facts.
David.
Okay.
Bench Manu, and I'll cut the French boy. Can I do it again?
Wait, I got start, bench, cut. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron James.
No, I refuse to answer that one.
You can't plead the fifth.
I will start all 3 of them and cut and bench myself.
That is a correct answer. That's a correct answer. Okay, how about this?
Twitter goes into meltdown mode. Instagram is drowning in reaction posts, and TikTok detectives are dissecting the footage frame by frame. They're overanalyzing every breath and facial expression. But here's the kicker. LeBron never dropped a name, yet everyone knew exactly who the target was. The comment sections turned toxic immediately. He's definitely aiming at Duncan. Those Spurs runs were cakewalks. Finally, someone admitted that sticking with one franchise is easy mode, but the clapback was fierce. Imagine having to campaign for your own greatness. A ring is a ring. End of story. You'd never hear Duncan yapping like this. The 24-hour sports cycle ate it up. Every talking head picked a corner, turning every show into a screaming match. But nobody anticipated the quiet storm brewing in the background. While LeBron was winning the media cycle, the lowest profile winner in San Antonio was actually taking notes. For the first time in 2 decades, Duncan was actually ticked off. And that is a huge deal. 19 seasons, 5 rings, 3 finals MVPs, a resume that speaks louder than any podcast. Through all the viral debates, Duncan never said a word. He didn't do the PR tour or push a personal brand. He just won games and went home. While other guys were chasing endorsements, he was in his garage working on muscle cars. No ego, just championship banners. That's why this situation is so jarring. Duncan wasn't on ESPN. He was probably coaching a rec league game. The man retired like a ghost. No farewell circus, No self-produced documentary, no Last Dance. He played, he finished, he vanished. The ultimate anti-celebrity. He cared so little about clout that it actually made him iconic. While peers were hunting for camera time, Duncan was running for the exit. He was allergic to the shine. Teammates joked he'd win Finals MVP and react like he just wrapped up a Tuesday scrimmage. No hysterics, just pure fundamentals. But people forget that quiet guys like Duncan are observant. They hear every whisper. And when they finally decide to talk, people listen. It hits harder because it's not bait for engagement. It happens because someone crossed a line. And by mid-January, LeBron stepped right over it. Rumors started swirling. Duncan was seen at a low-key charity gig, just insiders and fans, but news travels fast in these circles. A whisper turned into a conversation, and suddenly the story was everywhere. Allegedly, Duncan commented that the new school was trying to rewrite history and lacked respect for the pioneers. Sources claimed he wasn't his usual zen self. He was actually fired up. And let's be real, Tim Duncan doesn't get rattled publicly. If he was upset, it's a massive deal. It was a seismic shift. Then the clues started appearing. Manu Ginobili, his old running mate, posted a cryptic story on Instagram. Just a simple shot of rings on a table. No caption, no emojis needed, the message was crystal clear. Then Tony Parker surfaces on a podcast to address the GOAT controversy. He just smirked and said, "Some guys played the right way. Team over ego. That's how you really win." He didn't drop names, but he didn't have to. The timing was suspicious, to say the least. The Spurs dynasty was circling the wagons, and Duncan's continued silence just amplified the tension. It forced everyone to ask the unthinkable. Is the big fundamental finally about to break his silence? By the end of January, the whole league was on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. LeBron's comments had been dominating the news cycle for weeks. The debate was inescapable. TV, podcasts, social media feeds, yet it felt unresolved. It was like the entire sports world was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then the noise turned up a notch. NBA insiders started tweeting, hinting that Tim Duncan might actually sit down for a rare interview. Nothing was signed in ink, but sources close to his camp suggested he was finally open to talking. Suddenly, another reporter jumped into the fray. Multiple outlets had apparently reached out to Duncan recently. That detail alone was a shocker. This is the guy who famously turns down everything. No press tours, no media circuses. But this time, he was genuinely considering it. The speculation went into overdrive. Is he really going to clap back? Is he going to address LeBron man-to-man? What could Duncan possibly add after all these years that would move the needle? Here's the thing about legends. When they stay silent for 2 decades, their voice becomes currency. Every single word holds weight. Every sentence becomes a banner headline. And Duncan knew that. If he was going to break his silence, it wouldn't be reckless. It wouldn't be an emotional rant. It would be surgical, precise, and devastatingly quiet. Behind the scenes, Duncan's phone was ringing off the hook. Agents, media execs, old coaches, they were all telling him the same thing. You don't need to touch this. That is exactly the tell that something big was brewing. Some folks told him to stay above the fray, ignore the chatter, and avoid the circus. But others kept nudging him, insisting someone had to set the record straight. If not you, then who? Duncan was conflicted. Part of him genuinely didn't care. He never needed the validation, never chased the clout, never begged for anyone's approval. That internal tug of war is where this story gets real. Why start now? That was the question gnawing at him. But the other side of Tim Duncan, the competitor, was tired of watching history get rewritten. He was done watching arrogance get written off as context. Done with the narrative that what he and the Spurs built was somehow easier, less earned, or less meaningful than the modern super team era. That implication didn't sit right with him, not one bit. So he made the call. One interview, one moment, one chance to speak his piece, and then he would vanish right back into his private life. Here is what Duncan didn't calculate. What he was about to say would ripple through basketball history. January 28th, 2025. Tim Duncan sits down for a rare mic session. No ESPN cameras. No shouting match on a debate desk. Just a low-key basketball podcast, exactly the kind of environment Duncan would pick. The host is visibly nervous. This is the biggest get of his career, and the audience can feel the tension. They start with softballs. Duncan chats about retirement, his foundation work, coaching his kids. He is relaxed, smiling, vintage Duncan, humble, grounded, and perfectly comfortable out of the spotlight. About 15 minutes in, the host takes a deep breath and pivots. "Tim, I have to ask," he says. There has been a lot of chatter lately about legacies and what constitutes greatness. LeBron made some comments a few weeks back that went viral. Did you catch them, and do you have a take? The energy in the room shifts instantly. You can practically hear the air leave the studio. Duncan hesitates, not because he is unsure, but because he is calibrating. Then he speaks calm, steady, and dangerously confident. I saw them, Duncan says. I stayed out of these debates my whole career because I never thought they mattered. I played to hang banners. I played to be the best teammate possible. I played because I loved the game. What people said about my legacy afterward, that stuff never kept me up at night. The host nods, knowing that wasn't the real answer, it was the wind-up. Duncan continues, his voice steady, but the temperature in the room drops. I think there is something important that needs to be said, he adds. I am going to say it once, and then I am checking out. 5 championships are not easy. They aren't just stats on a Wikipedia page. Each one is years of sacrifice, Duncan says. Months of grinding, trusting the guy next to you, buying into something bigger than yourself, even when the world tells you that you need more help. He leans back in his chair. I played with giants, he continues. Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, David Robinson before them. Then he drops the line nobody saw coming. But here is what people miss, Duncan says. We made each other better because none of us needed to be the man. We just needed to win. The phrase hangs in the air like smoke. The host treads carefully. Are you implying modern players lack that mentality? Duncan doesn't blink, not even for a second. I am saying there is a difference between being great and needing everyone to tell you you're great. He says, some guys play for the trophy, some guys play for the statue, and those aren't always the same thing. Dead silence. The host tries to pivot, but it is too late. Duncan isn't done. Championships aren't about the zip code you played in or how many jerseys you wore, he continues. They are about sacrifice. They are about elevating your teammates. It is about punching the clock every single night, not just when the red light is on. He pauses, lets the words land, then adds quietly, almost offhandedly, maybe you're just trying to convince yourself. And that is a wrap. The interview runs for another 10 minutes, but it is all filler. That clip is already traveling. Within an hour, it is everywhere. Within 2 hours, it has more views than LeBron's original soundbite. The basketball world absolutely melts down. The big fundamental just dropped the hammer. It was the most direct thing he has ever said, yet somehow completely respectful. And here is the genius of it. He never actually says LeBron's name, not once. No shouting, no drama, just cold, hard facts delivered clean. That is exactly why it cuts so deep. The aftermath is immediate and massive. Social media turns into a digital war zone. Team LeBron versus Team Duncan. Analytics versus rings. Individual brilliance versus system success. The G-O-A-T debate officially goes off the rails. It is on steroids now. Analysts start dissecting every syllable of Duncan's response like it is Game 7 footage, pausing, rewinding, reading between the lines. One commentator notes, Tim Duncan has never engaged in this mudslinging. For him to speak up now tells you everything about how he views these modern narratives. Another analyst pushes back. But is Duncan playing fair? They ask. LeBron had to switch cities, adapt to different eras, carry entire franchises on his back. That is where the generational divide cracks wide open. Younger fans are bewildered. They grew up in the LeBron epoch. To them, Duncan is just a name in the history books. Why does Duncan's opinion even matter? They ask. But the OGs get it instantly. They remember Duncan dismantling super teams year after year. No flash, no theatrics, just fundamentals, discipline, and pure team basketball. They remember dynasties built on trust, not highlight reels or viral moments. Former players start chiming in, some dunking on the modern era hard. He is right, they say. The game has become way too focused on individual glory. Others defend the king. One retired all-star fires back. Let's be real. Duncan had Hall of Fame help his entire run. Let's not act like he dragged a team to the promised land alone. And here is where it gets spicy. LeBron still hasn't responded, not publicly. For a guy who usually addresses everything, that silence is deafening. Does he ignore it and look like he can't handle the heat? Or does he clap back and look defensive? Either way, it is a lose-lose situation, and everybody knows it. What makes this even crazier is that this story hasn't even hit the major networks yet. It is still bubbling in basketball circles, Twitter, podcasts, and YouTube. But once ESPN gets their hands on it, once the morning talk shows jump in and the casuals catch wind, this thing is going to go nuclear. And it raises a much bigger question.